I gotta say, we've got a real interesting one on the docket today. Fasting, protein, gut microbes, interpretive dance. Okay, maybe one of these actually isn't involved, but I'm not going to tell you which one it is, okay? You're just going to have to stick around and see for yourself. And if you do, I think you'll be in for quite a surprise. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Today we are talking about a combo that I personally have never seen studied like this before, and how it may be a simple yet effective strategy to improve one's cellular and metabolic state, and thus, as you know, health and longevity for the better. You know, that's what we do around these parts, or at least try to. We are talking about interpretive dance. Yep, you heard that. What? That's not where we're talking. Okay, fine. Even though interpretive dancing will probably do all these cellular and metabolic things, that's not the combo. This combo we are actually discussing today is protein pacing and intermittent fasting, and how it may very well be, like said before, a simple dietary intervention that can have a pretty big impact, at least according to this new hot off the scientific street study that we're gonna review. And I know what you're thinking. Those 4 words can mean so many freaking things. And you're right, there is a reason that we have over 100 videos solely on the Fasting 101 and How to Eat playlists. But what I was really initially intrigued by when I read this study was how these 2 distinct strategies were morphed together and measured. Taking intermittent fasting, which can consist of anything from dividing your 24-hour day into feeding fasting windows, which we typically classify as time-restricted feeding or time-restricted eating, but people call it intermittent fasting all the time, to performing a low-calorie or fast day 1 or multiple days a week to 1 or multiple days a month. A lot of options. And combining it with this newer term that I personally had to take a little deeper dive into, protein pacing, which is exactly what it sounds like. Dividing protein consumption throughout the day evenly across meals. And we've actually previously reviewed studies where this was done and had a very beneficial effect on protein absorption and muscle protein synthesis. For example, there was this one which looked at how healthy humans responded to even and uneven protein distribution across 3 meals, with the even group consuming 30 grams for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the uneven group consuming 10 grams for breakfast, 15 for lunch, and 65 for dinner. Finding that after measuring for the 24-hour protein synthesis response in both groups, the muscle protein synthesis rate was 25% higher in the even group compared to the uneven group. However, as we discussed across other protein-focused videos on this channel, which will be linked below, our body has the ability to utilize significantly more protein from one meal than previously thought. This can even, under the right circumstances, travel to and above 100 grams.
What the hell did you just say?
That's a lot of meatballs. There are also a number of hacks that can be deployed to maximize protein uptake, such as performing some activity snacking, which essentially is just some light movement after a meal. This has been shown to increase protein uptake into the muscle for muscle protein synthesis. You should have seen Muscle Beach after that news dropped. Anyway, this was just a nice, long-winded way to say there is a lot of nuance, especially when it comes to maximizing protein's efficiency within your body. We'll talk a little later about why that's so important, because it is. And many people aren't consuming enough. And one of the ways which seems to be beneficial and a good approach to maximize protein's longevity boosting effects is dividing up healthy doses evenly across all meals, otherwise known as the aforementioned protein pacing. It's not just pacing back and forth, eating a protein bar. That's what I thought too in the beginning. All right. Whew. You still with me? Good. Because that was just the intro. I'm just kidding. While we're sidetracked, I just thought and realized that interpretive dancing will actually help maximize protein uptake and probably muscle protein synthesis by doing it. So we're building the case there. Anyway, let's talk about this study and how a intermittent fasting protein pacing combo affected overweight middle-aged adults, along with their all-important microbiome and metabolome. I bet you thought we forgot about those microbes. Not up in here. Check that one off the list. Researchers out of Arizona State University sought to explore how a protein pacing intermittent fasting intervention compared to a standard calorie restriction intervention in altering microbiome health, metabolic health, and mediating total body weight and fat loss. I know, weight metrics aren't my favorite primary outcomes either, but don't worry, we're going to pay more attention to some of the cooler details. To do this, researchers recruited and randomly assigned 40 middle-aged overweight adults to either a calorie restriction group, where participants ate a restricted carbohydrate-heavy diet, with protein making up only around 15% of total calories, or a intermittent fasting high-protein pacing group, with protein making up around 35% of total calories, evenly distributed in 25-gram increments throughout the meals. And over the 8-week study duration, researchers monitored, measured, and coached participants, collecting both blood and stool samples and measuring body weight and body composition throughout. Now, you may be wondering, what about the fasting part? What type of protocol was it? Good observation. Participants in the intermittent fasting group fasted 1 day a week, spanning 30 to 60 hours, where they consumed only about 300 calories. So essentially, it was a 1-day weekly intermittent fasting protocol for the 8-week duration. All else considered, total calories were equal across both groups for the entire duration, meaning both groups were eating at a caloric deficit. So, what happened? Let's just say things got a little smelly for the researchers analyzing the stool samples because, But other than that, no real reason. By the way, participants were instructed and coached on eating real foods. Another important note. First, there were significant changes in both the gut microbiome and metabolome as a result of both interventions. However, the intermittent fasting protein pacing group seemed to exhibit more pronounced changes, as their microbiome community had a greater shift in a beneficial direction from baseline. This was characterized by an increase in several beneficial microbe communities which have been associated with more favorable metabolic profiles, meaning those microbes were synthesizing and influencing more metabolites that promoted cellular function. On that topic, the intermittent fasting protein group also saw a significant increase in circulating cytokines, specifically IL-4, 6, 8, and 13. These signaling compounds have been linked to lipolysis, or the breakdown of adipose fat tissue, weight loss, and modulating inflammation. Essentially, when compared to the calorie restriction group, the intermittent fasting protein group showed improved markers of gut health, having a greater diversity in their gut microbiome with an increase in beneficial microbes linked to lean body mass, enhanced metabolism, as blood markers indicated an increase in fat burning and improved metabolic profile. For example, this group saw a whopping 33% reduction in visceral fat, which is wild. And finally, a reduction in overall gut problems, as the participants in this group reported less overall gastrointestinal issues, which from a subjective perspective is very beneficial. This data ultimately suggested that combining intermittent fasting with protein pacing is more beneficial for gut health, metabolism, and weight loss than simply restricting calories, which is pretty interesting. And I wonder if the results would be the same or similar if the intermittent fasting protein pacing group did not eat out of caloric restriction and just ate regularly following that protocol. It would certainly be a good follow-up if you ask me. Now, it's important to remember, as with all studies, there were a number of limitations. This was a unique, yet relevant demographic, and the sample size was relatively small. So more research, especially comparing different intermittent fasting regimens and overall energy intake, is always warranted. That being said, I cannot help but draw these similarities between this protocol we just reviewed and the strategy I actually use in my everyday life. minus the calorie restriction part, which is one of the many reasons I was so intrigued when I came across and read this study in the first place. Anyway, let's talk about some key things worth knowing if you're thinking about crafting a strategy yourself. And if you've been around these parts, you know that we've done a fair share of geeking out on these three topics: fasting, protein, and gut health. Still working on the interpretive dance deep dive. And know that all three have a bunch of overlap, yet some specific caveats. So here are some things that I've learned and applied along the way. Starting with fasting. A growing body of evidence suggests that daily time-restricted feeding, or dividing your 24-hour day into strategic and consistent feeding and fasting windows, has some pretty impactful cellular and metabolic benefits. Here are a few key tips to keep in mind. First, aim for a 10-hour or less daily feeding window. This includes all energy consumed from both food and beverages, and you're going to want to position this window during the day, aligned with our circadian rhythms, not into the wee hours of the night, because we weren't biologically built for that. A good rule to implement here is finishing all of your energy consumption at least 2 hours before bed. And try your very best to standardize on eating real, whole, nourishing foods. Foods that your great-great-grandparents would recognize, because that will only maximize the effects of any protocol that you implement, and maximize the benefits for your gut microbes. Because although beneficial communities have been shown to be more prevalent as a byproduct of intermittent fasting, daily exercise, more outdoor time, and good high-quality circadian aligned sleep, the biggest modulator of your microbes is the food you feed them. Remember, they eat what you eat. And when fed the real, nourishing stuff, fruits, veggies, beans, legumes, wild meats, things from nature in their natural forms, good, health-promoting, gut-stabilizing communities prosper, spreading said health directly and indirectly via metabolites throughout the rest of the body. While the other side, or modern ultra-processed way of eating, does the exact opposite. Yeah. So be a badass societal rebel and eat the good stuff for both you and your microbes. Speaking of eating, we gotta talk about why protein is just so very important for both here and now health and your vitality over time. They are the essential building blocks which maintain and enhance muscle, synthesize essential peptides, hormones, and neurotransmitters, facilitate critical chemical reactions, build antibodies, and as a result, help you stave off frailty, fragility, dysfunction, and disease. And let me tell you a little known fact, which we discuss a lot in the other protein videos, so check them out. Most of us do not eat enough of it on a daily basis for optimal bodily function. So here are a few strategies that I use to optimize my day-to-day protein consumption. First, aim to eat 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight a day. So if you weigh 150 pounds, aim for, 140 to 160 grams a day and use that as your baseline. Next, I like to start and end my early intermittent fasting window with a high protein meal, consuming a hearty dose after my morning workout from high quality real sources, might I add, and following my closing protein meal with a nice long walk or activity snack. It's also important to try to aim for a minimum of 20 to 30 grams per meal, because this will likely ensure that you trigger the processes to ramp up muscle protein synthesis, something that may not happen if you only have 5 to 10 grams. Now, there is certainly much more when it comes to these three strategies. And as I mentioned before, we have deep dive videos on all of this, which will be linked in the show notes below. The important thing to take away here, at least from my perspective, is once again, what you do from a day-to-day habits, routines, and rituals perspective matters much more than society would have you believe. So taking some time to up your health literacy, map out a plan, and slowly deploy it really is the secret sauce to feeling how you're capable of feeling each and every damn day. It doesn't just happen. You, the owner of your health, need to make it happen. Just like I need to make the interpretive dancing roll and longevity video happen. I mean, at this point, I'm pretty much convinced the connection is real. So this might have been that video.